Shamil and others for organizing all this session. This is Alex from UCL. I'm associate professor in robotics and AI. Glad to talk about the research, particularly in terms of the multi-skill learning, which look at solving the locomotion problem slightly in a different perspective. So the overall, first start with very quickly with the research vision. Then I mainly talk about three types of research which are representative. Then I would like to leave some time for everyone to have open discussion in depth. So I think Jonathan has already gave a very good overview and motivation why doing this research. And personally, for me,
for a while, because we don't have video, we don't have Zoom.
So personally, for me, the AI research is largely inspired by the DARPA Robotics Challenge, and the robot intelligence is quite limited, and that inspired a lot of journeys in terms of moving gradually through robot control optimization-based, gradually towards learning, and particularly, I'm also looking for viable means how we can combine learning and control and optimization, similar to what Ruben and Takahiro have discussed just now. So at the moment, most of the talks we have seen so far are staying on this stage in terms of learning optimization. And personally, I think in long term, some stage we need to move to the multi-agent way of learning as well. This will contribute to the artificial motor cortex. And then eventually, I think the overarching goal for most of us sitting here today is to solve the artificial general intelligence problem and create artificial lives. Personally, to me, if I would be able to reach the stage of making the artificial motor cortex becoming true, is already a great achievement before my retirement. So I'll quickly show the state of the art as I have promised. There are a lot of great works we have seen throughout this week. Particularly due to limited time, I can only briefly go through three representative works here. One is the ARMA paper. Particularly, there's a trend now that we use privileged information in the simulation, and then to train how to use supervised learning to train and extract the latent vector. Let's say how we can generate the efficient feature embedding such that we can use this low-dimensional data to train and learn the policy. So this is a very effective way of dimensional reduction, as you have seen from the previous talk, that using such privileged information, it's very, very robust to improve compared to the previous work we have seen in the state of art in terms of speed, the versatility, and etc. So with that said, there's also another work which tries to combine, try to bridge optimization and reinforcement learning as well. Due to limited time, there are a lot of other state of art I could not cover. So particularly, I cherry-picked those which are highly relevant to the talk today. So here is the first of the three research strands I would like to cover in terms of the multi-skill learning, which is featured as cover in the 2020 Science Robotics. So particularly, this work originally is largely inspired by humanoid research, coming from my background, not quadruped, because original thought is that the humanoid robot should be able to walk, do all sorts of parkour, manipulate, dribbling the ball, play soccer, etc. And therefore, it's very, very, very hard to use one IO policy that can do all the sorts of things. That inspired the research of using multiple IO policies and what are the viable means to train multi-skill motors, multi-skill locomotion, for example. So particularly if we look at quadruped locomotion, these are all the real footage that has taken from the real world experiments. And the one thing I have observed is that despite we can randomize a lot of cases, add a lot of disturbance in simulation, there's still a lot of cases in the real world that it's very, very hard to simulate. We can observe something similar, but quite not quite the same. And for example, the grass, the muddy ground after the rain, and the slipperiness of the soft mat, and the robot can spin actually around the gravity factor, can spin around the vertical axis. So a lot of those phenomena are very difficult to observe in simulation. Apart from the existing randomization techniques, that inspires a particular work that how about the IO policy? If we look at single policy, usually we have a lot of existing technique that can train it really, really well to do one particular type of tasks. For example, fall recovery or rolling over the ground, and how it can fall and get up, how it can sprawl its leg, resist external disturbances, how it can quickly spin on the ground using in a very gymnastic way, how to do trotting, galloping, bounding, pacing, all different types of gait. So if we look at one particular IO policy, or let's say a neural network policy, it's not hard to achieve such performance. So the question is that how we can bring all this in one bundle to group all these capabilities in and such that one robot is able to perform all of that. So that boils down to the thought that how about an hierarchical structure? So that inspires the work of MELA, so the multi-expert learning structure we have proposed in the Science Robotics paper, such that we have separate neural networks. For example, here we have 8 experts, each is good at one particular type of skill, motor skill. And on top of that, there's a gating network here. We can consider, let's call it a coach, that it can coordinate different players here. So the story here is that at different times, different expert is needed for that particular situation, and the gating network would activate that expert, or at different times, different ones will be activated differently, and such that we can synthesize all this expert, all these 8 different experts into a synthesized one. We can fuse them together as one, so such that it will be able to do cover a wide range of different skills. So due to limited time, I will stay in the conceptual level that, roughly speaking, it has 2 training stages. It's very similar to a lot of topics we have seen before. Very often we boil things down into 2 stages. So first stage is that we will train very distinct skills first, such as fall recovery and trotting. So these policies will be warm start policy to initialize other experts. So it's kind of rule of thumb that all the experts will get started from something. So here we equally divide them into 2 groups, initialize them. And then after training that, we come at the second stage to co-train them all together. So the takeaway message here, to make it easier to understand, you can imagine this is the coach and we have 8 players. And after learning how to dribble the ball, pass the ball, and strike the ball, and all the players come together to train in different simulation scenarios, right? So the rest of the setting is pretty standard impedance control for the talk to robot, because in simulation we have perfect torque source. So here is just an visualization which matches the classical feedback control. So we have a dual loop here. The synthesized expert is taking all the state feedback here, which is proprioceptive feedback. And the gating network will see the same observation plus the high-level task goals in order to activate all different experts. So as you can see here, so the different expert is illustrated with different color, and it's pretty much like a music bar, right? So all of them coordinate and get activated in harmony according to the situation. So here I will play back very quickly the key part of the video. So this is the fall recovery that has been trained before, and the robot can, so we didn't apply any domain randomization, and it works right away in the hardware. And this is how how the for recovery and trotting works. And it also extrapolates some other skills. So as you can see here, by fusing different neural networks together, so the for recovery and the getting up, they are all naturally combined. So the fusion allows all these different IO policies to figure out their own transitions. So we don't have to hard code. All right, so let me skip this part. So as you can see here, the for recovery will be continued if the robot doesn't recover once. It can continue doing so until it succeeds, then continue trotting. So in particular, there's more detail we can see from simulation. We can do a crash test like this, which we cannot do in reality. So here's blind, there's no vision here. There's purely blind walking. So particularly, I really like this moment. You can see how the legs coordinated according to different state feedback, and the robot can spin very, very nicely. So let's see it again. So you can see how they retrieve the leg, avoid collision, and when spin on the spot and try to turn as fast as possible, it actually uses 3 legs rather than 4 legs to have very, very small friction. So it can spin on the ground very, very quickly and then resume the gait once the heading is right. So all of this, we find it very, very hard to hard code using traditional optimization parameter optimization method. It's very hard to parameterize these features. There are a lot of lesson takeaway messages, but 2 key points I'm happy to share here is that we found out, interestingly, because there are a lot of experts within the whole integrated structure, we found it's quite robust because different experts can act in the right time. Even when some things are not seen before, they're quite robust against those uncertainties. And also, particularly if we know there are a wide range of scenarios, and this scenario is very different from each other, and this framework is much easier to train and is much easier to alter compared to the traditional way if we just do it things through one single neural network. A small question here is that how about manipulation? I got asked very often about this. The short answer is yes, it's a positive answer, that the similar scheme can also be used to have different manipulation skills, as you can briefly see here through snapshots. And the robot, using this multi-skill framework, is able to operate along horizon, a sequential task, manipulation task in the long horizon scale. Okay, so very briefly, as we have had a discussion about model-based versus model-free, or like MPC versus IO, I'd like to quickly share a small student project that has been done like 2 years ago and published last year in the ICRA'22. So we found out that in a lot of cases, as I said in the beginning, we are able to train one neural network super well to deal with one type of tasks, where when the modality of that configuration does not change. So maybe there are some corner cases that learning cannot cover, but in most cases, as you can see, usually when we test outside, it doesn't feel that badly. But however, when the modality of the configuration operation changes a lot, for example, if I block one motor and one motor is jammed, or if I cut off one leg of that robot, so I believe many of those IO policies will fail if they're trained in the single scale, right? So if I just chop off one leg of the robots, that our policy has no way to work anymore. So that inspired a way. There's some discrete nature of the locomotion problem and continuous nature. And this, we also have neural network as a functional universal function approximator that can do the job. And we also have MPC, which can exactly embed the constraints. So what is the nice way to put all these features together? I don't have the final answer for that, but this interesting small student project shows that we can do it through by embedding the interaction model inside the MPC. So you have here different conditions. We have the feature embedding here that we only need to collect the past 10 samples within 0.2 seconds to understand and optimize and try to understand what is the most likely condition now. And using that condition, and then we can update a neural network which represent interaction model. So this is very, very similar to the traditional model we use for MPC, right? For example, single point mass model or the linear independent model, etc. But instead of that, we just use neural network for the model. The rest of the MPC is quite straightforward. We can embed jaunt limit, acceleration limit, position limit, etc. And the beauty of that is that the nonlinear features of the interaction can be captured very well. And let me speed up a bit, somewhere from middle. So the neural network can fit very well the nonlinear interaction model with the environment. And the MPC is good at figuring out how the robot should act in order to counterbalance these changes. So for example, sorry, let me do it again. So for example, here you have a continuous external push. So the interaction model knows that this external push, and the MPC can figure out what is the best way to do that to counterbalance the external perturbation without changing the heading. And same works for the faulty motor. You can jam one motor here at different places, or you can even chop off one leg and the robot can still work. So the MPC can figure out, given all the joint constraints, acceleration constraint, velocity constraint, etc. Now the interaction model changes and what it should do in order to sustain the working velocity. So that's just about the meta learning part. And interestingly, I would like to share a work about perceptual locomotion, which looks at the problem slightly from different angle. And I think I have the answer for Tadahiro's question before, how in terms of the naive solution. So here particularly, we are thinking about how to find a killer application for like the machines to be useful. So in this case, it needs to be very, very easy, simple, and low cost, and in order to be widely used. So the motivation is that is there a simple way to do? And we have current paper that is under review. And we found out actually there is a way to directly put the height map effectively in this representation here. It's represented in terms of rays in the polar coordinate. So if we represent in this way, then the neural network can learn a policy that finds out a correspondence between the ray scanning of this profile and to the correct actions. So in other words, the action mapping can be learned. However, I should point out that it's a very specific case. We look at very, very specific types of stair-like terrains in man-made environment. So the reason is that, as I mentioned, we look at the Killer app. So if you look at around our environment, mostly it's flat plains. And the only place we need the legs to negotiate is basically stairs, right? Or stair-like a step. So in that case, it's a very, very particular type of terrain. And we only need very few and sparse visual observation in order to capture this profile. And such that we figure out within the leg workspace here, what is the best action that can negotiate this terrain height, right? So this terrain height can be captured by the ray length here. So in this very, very specific application within our daily environment, we do not need very complicated structure, and therefore we can extremely simplify the structure and make it very, very cost effective for the real world implementation. As you can see here, it's a very, very, it's a vanilla application here, right? You have the proprioceptive information and exteroceptive information. You directly feed it back here and train it. So as Takahiro has mentioned, if you simply put in this way, it's likely to fail. So particularly what the paper is about is to offer a curriculum such that it's easier to learn a neural net policy as such. So in this way, all the rest of information is easily available with most of the hardware. Okay, so I have 3 minutes left. So here just to show that it can negotiate with most of different stair-like terrains in our daily life. And we also put a lot of noise here up to 15 centimeters standard deviation, and it still works with stairs. So if we only look at how we can use electric machines for daily environment like stairs, we can offer really, really low cost, cheap solutions. Very quickly to talk about future work. So those are the topics you have seen throughout the week. And I believe there are still medium and long-term challenges we're going to solve. In particular, share some thoughts here is that the data efficiency is one of the problems we are looking at in the research group. And there's a work about connectivity presented this week. So different configurations have different connectivity and transition between each other, as you can see here. And the duality, the dual way transition has different level of difficulties. For example, falling down is easier, getting up is more difficult. And in this way, we know what is the probability distribution between different states or configurations, and therefore we don't have to do uniform sampling, which is not data efficient, right? So if we understand this better, and then we can improve data efficiency. Another point is the hierarchical structure, that we can take some inspiration from nature, that's how we can design hierarchical structure, that we can put different learning or MPC or different controllers into one framework. So another thought to share to inspire some question and answer is that now all this hardware becomes so much available and the price is getting lower and lower. So the killer app idea is that to put simple rails as such for stair climbing, that costs nothing. And also the neural network is relatively small and very easy to run. This means that if we can bring the cost further down, we will be able to see a lot of robots in real life use. There's some open questions I have written here. Some of that map to the previous session very, very well, coincidentally. For example, control has a lot of precision, like what was mentioned before in terms of MPC, you can precisely put foot over the stepping stone, but learning has a lot of adaptation to uncertainties in the wide environment. So the learning uses the neural network probabilistic prediction of actions to maximize the reward and success rate, which works perfectly for the outdoor environment. Okay, so I would like to conclude my session by thank you for your attention. And a short note is that UCL is expanding its robotics initiative in the Olympic Park, and we'll be hiring. So I thank you very much for attention, and I will leave the question here for the discussion.
Are there any more questions or comments from the audience? Someone wants to speak?
Quick question. With the scale line of the stairs, are you able to disambiguate the angle at which you're coming in at, or do you just assume that you're coming straight on? Because if you're at an offset, you just be thinking that each step is wider than that one. Nice.
So there's a lot of echo, so I can hear only 30% of words, but I guess your question is that whether or not the robot needs to go straight ahead to the stair without an angle, something like that. Is that right?
Exactly. Can you handle angles relative to the stair?
So the answer is no, not so well. So it means that it's a very good question, because we believe there's no free lunch, because the ray scanning is very, very sparse and simple. So the inspiration of this research to really use simple devices, for example, even like ultrasound or sonar, that can connect with neural network directly and work. So that's the purpose of this. So meaning that the information is very, very sparse and not sufficient. So if you approach it with random angles or a lot of challenging terrains, as you have seen before in the previous sessions, We haven't tested extensively, but we believe this wouldn't work, to be honest. But rather, it's a very specialized, narrowed application to have a very low cost effective solution for this very specific application, such that if you go in front of stair, you just head towards the stair and just go up. And the logic is that in real world applications, it's easy to use in this way, and this wouldn't really bother in terms of usability.
Thank our speaker again. So if you have any questions, I think Alex is still on Zoom, so directly in the chat you can contact him with questions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for organizing, and also you can drop me an email if we wouldn't have a chance to talk anymore. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Thank you very much.